And so the recording of this session I'll make available to you after we stop this afternoon. I'll make this an unlisted YouTube video and send you the link so that you can watch the session over again. So today we'll go for 2 hours, and I'll give you an assignment when we finish. And the assignment will basically be replicating what I've demonstrated. What we're going to work on is a tree survey. So there should be trees in your area that you could use to complete this. So it's a nice example. And next week we'll have a question and answer session for an hour. So if you run into any issues or difficulties, or if you have further questions about any of the components of Merge and Maps, that's a good opportunity for you to ask those. Kind of an informal chat. If you watch the video, you know the course topics. So at the end of the day, like I said, I'll be giving you an assignment. And in terms of resources, you'll be getting step-by-step instructions. So I'll give you a PDF of all the step-by-step instructions that I'm going through. And for individual tasks, there will be a link to YouTube videos. So you can also just watch a 3 or 4 minute YouTube video for a task, and if you don't want to read the step-by-step. And of course, there's no course data. We'll be creating the data as we collect it today. At the end of the course, when you turn in your assignment, I will give everyone an official QGIS certificate for completing the course. And that's a brief introduction. I should mention at the outset, and many of you are probably aware, there are 2 QGIS related data collection apps or systems out there. There's one called QField that was developed by OpenGIS-CH, and these 2 systems probably have more in common than they have differences. One reason I started using Merge and Maps is because it was the first one that offered the app available on both Android and iPhone. And I find the synchronization component of Merge and Maps to be the best of the 2 and the easiest to use. So that's why I decided to build this course around Merge and Maps. So the general workflow with this system is we do most of the work in QGIS, and you set up your project there. You then use the Merge and Maps plugin to synchronize this up to your Merge and Maps cloud account. And then when you get onto your mobile device with Merge and Maps input installed, you will be able to pull that project down to your mobile device and go out and collect data. And you can then just use the synchronization component to pull this project to and from the desktop and mobile device so that both are in sync. And Lutra Consulting did quite a bit of kind of rebranding of this whole tool stack this spring. So everything now every part of it is now called Merge and Maps, including the plugin, the mobile device app, and the cloud component as well. So for the course, I'll be using QGIS 3.2.2. If you are using one of the more recent versions of QGIS 3.2.4 or 3.2.6, that's fine. You will also we'll go over how to sign up for a Merge and Maps account, how to install and configure the QGIS plugin for Merge and Maps, and then how to use the Merge and Maps input app. And so again, it's really nice that's available for both Apple or Android devices. So Merge and Maps is several things. It's a cloud service. So the cloud service will store all of your data in your account. They have different licensing schemes. So there's a free version of Merge and Maps, but you can also pay an extra subscription fee to get more storage and more support. This cloud service also allows you to manage versions of a QGIS project and share projects. So for example, you can actually just use Mergent Maps simply to share a QGIS project with a colleague, even if you're not doing data collection. I know several people who use this service simply to share projects because it works very well. So it's also a QGIS plugin, and the plugin allows you to turn your project into a Mergent Maps project and push that project up to the cloud and then synchronize it once it's in your cloud account. And that plugin has a component that you'll see in the QGIS browser panel as a data provider. And there's also a small toolbar, and the functionality between these two is pretty much the same. It's just in two different places. And I will mention what I'm going to walk through today will be allow you to set up a project with the most flexibility. There are some more straightforward, faster ways to get started. You can see right from the Mergent Maps webpage, there's a little orange button for create, and you can use this to create a simple project to use for data collection right from the Mergent Maps webpage. And you can do the same thing from the mobile app. The mobile app has the same functionality where you can create a small project right on your phone or your tablet to use for data collection. Those, though, they're quick and easy, but they don't offer as much flexibility as what I'm about to show you. So the input app itself looks like this, where there's a menu across the bottom. When it launches, you have to sign into your account with your credentials. And you'll see on the My Projects tab, you'll see any projects that you have downloaded to the phone. If you see this download arrow, this is a project that has not yet been, that is in your cloud account, but you have not downloaded it to the phone. So you can use that to download that project. This recycle synchronize icon indicates that there have been changes to the project and it needs to be synchronized so that you push your changes up to the cloud. And then otherwise it'll have just the check mark indicating that it's up to date and on your phone. You can click on any of these to open up the project, and it will then open up the project just as you had it saved on your in QGIS desktop. So any symbology that you've created in QGIS will look the same in Mergent Maps input. And then if you use, I'm going to show you how to use the drag and drop designer and set up form widgets. And if you've done that, you can set up very complex forms for when you're about to record a new feature. You can, in this case, design the form so that you get different tabs for different attribute columns in that data set. And you can set up widgets to basically make it easier for the person doing the data collection to enter that data. So I'm going to show you a lot of those useful field form widgets and how to set them up in the demo. So today's exercise is going to be a tree survey. I assume that everyone has trees nearby that you can use to complete the assignment. So it's a nice, easy way to have a project that everyone can work on. So we're going to conduct a small tree survey where we just answer a couple of basic questions about the tree and take a picture, the date that it was collected and things like that, and save the point. So the basic workflow with this is first preparing the project. So this is where you can load background maps, WMSTS layers, and then your survey layers. So you can have multiple survey layers. Here we're just going to have a single point layer that we work with today, but you can set up point, line, or polygon layers and have multiple survey layers in a project. We're going to look at setting up the attribute form, apply styling to the layers, set up map themes, and define the layers which are going to be used for survey purposes. Because it's a best practice to distinguish between layers in your project that are there for background versus survey that you're going to be collecting data into. We're then going to set up the project with the QGIS plugin for Mergin Maps and transfer the project to the Mergin cloud. We're then going to use the Mergin Maps input app to collect some data and synchronize the changes back to the Mergin cloud. And then get back into QGIS desktop and pull those changes down from the cloud to QGIS. So some best practices at the beginning. It's important that you create a single folder for your project, and everything should go into that, including your QGIS project file, the QGZ file, and all the data that you're going to be using with that. So everything should get put into one folder. You can use the XYZ tile services or WMST services as base maps. Plugins such as Quick Map Services or other local base map providers are also good choices. You can use also it's important to use the GeoPackage format for your data, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but the synchronization is designed around the GeoPackage. It's also possible to use PostGIS. There is another way to set that up, but you should be using either GeoPackage or PostGIS as the format for your data so that you get the most out of the synchronization component of Mergin Maps. And then taking that one step further, for each survey layer that you have, you should use a different GeoPackage. So if you have a point, a line, and a polygon survey layer, you should set each one of those up into separate GeoPackages. And that has to do with schema locking. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So those are the best practices to keep in mind. And then that you're going to distinguish between background layers, which will be read-only, and survey layers into which your collected data will be written to. Okay, so with that, I'm going to get into QGIS and start this demo. So I am in QGIS 3.2.2, and I have a pretty a brand new profile set up here, so it's pretty clean. And I'm going to start by adding an XYZ tile service. So I'm going to, as of, I think it was 3.16, QGIS now ships with this OpenStreetMap XYZ tile service. So this is always available in QGIS. And I'm going to start by adding this OpenStreetMap service to QGIS. And I'm going to zoom in to my neighborhood. Okay, so this is the part of Denmark that I'm located in. And there's also, I'm going to give you directions for this. There's another, for adding aerial imagery, I'm going to be using the XYZ tile service for Bing aerial imagery. So this is one that I already added. So if I right click on this tile service and choose edit connection, I can show you the connection info. This will be in your instructions, but there's simply this URL here that I had to plug in. And I'll just paste this into the chat also. So that's the URL for this Bing aerial imagery service. And then, so you can create this, connect to this service simply by entering that URL and giving the service a name and clicking OK. And so we now have the Bing aerial imagery and OpenStreetMap, and I'm going to add Bing aerial imagery to my map canvas as well. So if I now switch to my layers panel, I'll see both of those layers. And this is nice when you're using this field data collection app, because they provide context and detail around where you're collecting data, but don't take up any space. They're just being pulled from the internet. So I'm going to save this project. And before I do that, if I bring up Windows Explorer here, I have a folder for this course, and I've created an empty folder for this demo that I'm doing right now. I've just called it course demo. So this is just an empty folder, and this is where I'm going to be saving my QGIS project file and all the geo packages that I create. I'm going to put them all into this one single folder. So with that, I'm going to save this project. And I've called my project October course. So one reason that the GeoPackage format is important is that Merge and Map Input supports collaborative editing, meaning that you can have multiple data collectors work on the same Merge and Maps project, so a data collecting team. And that's only if you use the GeoPackage format for your survey layer. So if you want to do collaborative editing with your project, if you want to have multiple people working on the same project, using that GeoPackage format for your survey layers is essential. If you use, for example, an Esri shapefile instead, Merge and Maps is not able to detect the changes from other users, and it's just going to create duplicate copies of that layer called layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So it doesn't really work if you're not using a GeoPackage format. So what I'm going to do now is create just a boundary for my study area. And so I'm going to be using this and this will come in handy for several settings that I'm going to set later. So just having a layer that equals the study area of my data collection region can be a useful thing to have. So to create this new layer, I'm going to go to the layer menu, create layer, new GeoPackage layer. And I'm going to put this into that same course folder. And I'm going to call the GeoPackage study area. And that's what I'll call the layer as well. Geometry type is going to be polygon. And I'm going to use my local UTM zone here. And I don't need any attributes for this. I just need the polygon. So I'll just click OK with that. And I have an empty study area layer. So I'm just going to symbolize it now. So I'm going to, from the layers panel, I'll use the layer styling panel. And I will simply give this an outline. So I'm going to choose just outline, simple line as the symbol layer type here. And I'll give this a bright yellow color that will show up. And now I'm going to digitize my study area boundary. So I'm going to right click on study area and toggle into editing mode and use the polygon feature tool to digitize this polygon. I'm going to include part of this park And there I have a small study area boundary that's basically just the block or two around where I live that I will be doing a tree survey in. And I can take this out of edit mode and click save. So I'm just checking my notes. So next I'm going to create the survey layer and add all the attributes for it. So again, this is going to be for a tree survey. So I'm going to add about 8 different attribute columns to it. I'm going to collect things like the tree species, whether it's deciduous or evergreen, whether it's a fruit tree or not, the circumference around the base of the tree, take a photograph, the date. I'm going to add a column for notes in case there's something that I encounter out in the field that I wasn't anticipating. I have a place to record notes. And then finally, I'm going to have a field for the data collector so I can have a record of who collected the features. So I'm going to create this as a separate geo package. This is because this is going to be a survey layer, and every survey layer should be in its own geo package. So I'm going to go again to layer, create layer, new geo package layer. And I'll just call this survey trees. So both the geo package and the table name will have that name. It doesn't have to be that way, but for a quick demo, that works. And I'm going to make this a point layer. And I'm going to again put this into my local UTM zone. And I'm going to add the first field. So the first field I'm going to have for this is tree species. And this is going to be text data. So I'll click add to fields list to add that first field. The next one is going to be tree type. This is also going to be text data. Then I'm going to have one called fruit tree. This will be a Boolean field, whether or not this particular tree is a fruit tree or not. So I'm going to choose Boolean, true or false, for that field type. Then I'm going to add circumference. And this is going to be a decimal number real field, so that the user can enter decimals. And I'll add that to the field list. I'm going to add a field for photograph. This will be text data. One for the date that the data was collected. So this will be a date and time field. Notes. I'll make this text data. And then finally, collector. This will be a field to store the data collector's name. I'll add that. So I have all this fields listed now that I want to add to this, and I will go ahead and click OK. And now I have my survey trees layer in my project. And I'm just going to spend a moment giving this trees layer a symbol. I'm just going to kind of give it a kind of a target kind of icon. So I'm going to, in the layer styling panel, choose the simple marker component here. And I'm going to set the size to 4. And I'm going to increase the stroke width a little bit. I'm going to give this a fill color of bright red. And I'll do the same for the stroke color. I'm then going to click this plus button to add a new symbol layer to this. And I'm going to scroll down here and find the cross icon. And I'm going to, again, make this one same red and increase the size of this. Maybe about 8. And increase the stroke. So we kind of have like a target kind of icon for that. With this kind of thing, I could also give it a transparent fill and have it have that sort of even more of a target symbol. That looks good. That's good. I'll leave it at that. And I'll save my project. So what I'm going to show next is how to create online and offline base maps. So if you have internet connectivity or cellular service in the field, you can use these WMS, WMTS layers like OpenStreetMap and Bing aerial imagery. However, if you don't have internet connectivity when you're out in the field, you'll need to set up offline versions of those layers so that you can still use them even though you don't have connection to the internet. So this is done by creating MB tile files for each of those services you want to access in that situation. And one note about that, it is when you're out there with your phone, the GPS signal it'll still receive GPS readings even if you don't have connection to the internet. So you can be in a remote area and have poor internet connectivity, but the GPS will still work. So setting up offline base maps in those scenarios can be useful. And we're going to use map theme so that you can toggle between an online and offline version of your map. And also I'll show you how to do that now. So first, it's best to set the size of your XYZ tile layer to 256 by 256 so that the labels are readable on a mobile device. This is just a little tip that I learned. So I'm going to, for example, right click on the OpenStreetMap layer and go to the layer properties for it. And I'm going to switch to the source tab. And you'll see down below here, there is this in the layer source section, there's this tile resolution setting. And I'm going to switch this from unknown to standard 256 by 256. And again, that'll just make this more readable on a mobile device. And I'll do the same for the Bing aerial imagery. Those often come in with an unknown tile resolution, so you can always set this when you're going to be using it for data collection. Okay. Another plugin that I find useful, or a plugin that I find useful for setting up these MB tile files is the Zoom Level plugin. So if I go to the plugins menu to manage and install plugins and search for Zoom, which I did just before class. So I'm on the All tab and I've typed Zoom into the search box and I get all the plugins that relate to Zoom. And there's this one called Zoom Level. So this plugin will display the zoom level of your current map in the status bar down below here. And so this can help you create the right setting for the MB tile files when you generate them. So these zoom levels are used on tiled web maps. So typically range from 0, which is a global view, to 20, which is just like a city block scale. So the Zoom Level plugin kind of helps you understand what zoom level you're currently at. So you can see right now I'm at zoom level 17.96. So that's where you'll see that Zoom Level plugin appear, is down in the status bar. Sometimes you have to refresh the map for it to show up. I'm going to right click on my study area and zoom to layer just to make sure I'm centered on that area in my map. And what I'm going to do next is open up the processing toolbox and find the tool I'm going to use to create the MB tile file layers. So I'm going to just search in here for MB tiles. And you can see here, generate XYZ tiles for MB tiles. And what I want to do here is I want to make sure that I, in my table of contents, have just the layer that I want to build XYZ tiles for. So I'm going to turn everything off in this case, except I'll start with Bing aerial imagery, and I'm going to set the extent using the current map extent. And this is where the zoom level comes in. This tool always asks for the minimum and maximum zoom. So here you can set this using what you see in the zoom level plugin when you've looked at that. So I was at 17.96, so I can put this at 18 with a maximum zoom level of 19. And I can leave all the other arguments the same, but for the output, I do want this to be in the same folder with the rest of my layers. So I'm going to save this to a file, and I'm going to put it into my project folder. And I'll call this Bing. And click Save, and then click Run. So it's generating tiles for zoom level 18 and 19, as you can see there. And the reason it's important to understand what zoom level you're at and to set them when you're running these tools is that if you, for example, tell QGIS to generate too many different zoom levels for your layer, it just makes it really, really large. It can become a very large MB tiles file layer. So I usually try to limit this to just the zoom levels that I'll be working with so that I don't create unnecessarily large MB tile files. So I can click close. Or actually, I just rerun this because I'm going to now do the same operation for the OpenStreetMap data. So I'm going to turn off the Bing aerial imagery and turn on OpenStreetMap. And I'm going to keep the extent the same. I think for this one, I'll go up to 20 for the maximum zoom because the OpenStreetMap is less detailed than the imagery. And so I can use a little more detail and not have too large of a file size. And I'm going to save this to my same folder, and I'll call this OSM. So it built tiles for 18, 19, and 20. I can click close. Okay, so those tile layers have been created. And if I now open up my folder, I can see that I have a Bing MB tiles file and an OSM MB tiles file. And you can see they're pretty manageable. One's 7 megabytes and the other is 3.5 megabytes. I generally like to make sure these are below 50 or so. I think depending on the kind of phone you have, they can just start becoming a little slow if they get larger than that, in my experience. But we can now just add these to our project as extra layers. So I have already set a favorites for my field data collection course. And if you're not familiar with these, I can set any folder as a favorite in the browser panel. So for example, if I want to go in and find my documents where this is living, and then I have a folder called Geo and one called courses, and then here's my data collection folder. If I want to make this a favorite, I simply right click on it and choose add as a favorite. And it will then appear up here under my favorite section. And this makes it a very easy way to access folders that are nested several levels deep on your file system. And once that's created, you can also just rename it. So here after I created it, I renamed the favorite by right clicking on it to just give the folder or the favorite a name so that it's easy for me to see. So there's my field data collection course favorite, and in there are the contents of that. So I can go into course demo and I can see the Bing MB tiles layer and the OSM tiles. So I can right click on one of these and add it to my project, add the other to the project. And so now you can see we have 4 layers. We have basically Bing offline, Bing online, OSM offline, OSM online. And they will look, identical. You're going to see no difference between these 2 layers. So they work really well for the situation where you're not having any internet connectivity out in the field. So to make this work with the input app, the last step here is to create what are called map themes. So map themes basically tell QGIS which layers are participating in that map theme. So this little eye icon in the layers panel is the manage map themes button. So what I'm going to do is turn on my survey layer, my study area, and my online Bing aerial imagery. And I'm going to go back to this and tell QGIS to add a theme. So this theme will be the Bing online, since this is using the XYZ tile service requiring an internet connection. Now I can turn that layer off and turn on the MB tiles version and go back and add another theme and call this Bing offline. So now I have 2 themes created, and I'll find them from this manage map themes menu, and I can toggle them off and on, and it will switch which layers are turned on at the moment. And I'll be able to do the same thing from my input app on my mobile phone. So I'll do the same thing for OpenStreetMap. I will add a theme for OSM online using the XYZ tile service. And OSM offline for the MB tiles layer. So now I have all 4 of my map themes set up. And I can go and test to make sure that they are set up correctly. If I made a mistake on one, I can simply go and make sure the correct layers are toggled on for that map theme. And then I could replace the theme if I wanted to. So I could say this is actually the OSM online, and it will replace that theme with what I have turned on. So you can go back and edit those if you need to. So there are also some project level settings that are useful when using this for data collection. I mentioned that we have to distinguish between background layers and survey layers, and we can do that from project properties. So if I go to the project menu and open up project properties, there is a data sources tab. So the data sources tab lists all the layers in my project and allows me to tell QGIS if that is a read-only layer or an identifiable layer using the identify features tool, and whether it's searchable, etc. So what I can do is basically tell QGIS that the study area is going to be read-only. I'm not going to be editing that. Trees is my survey layer, so I want to make sure that that's not read-only. And I only really need the survey trees to be identifiable. I don't need these other layers to be identifiable. They're just base maps. And I don't need the study area to be searchable. So I only really need my survey layer to be identifiable and searchable. And so I can set that kind of information from this data sources tab. There is also in the Mergin Maps input app, there's an option in that to zoom to the project extent. And if it's not set, Mergin Maps will zoom to all the visible layers. And when you think about it, the OpenStreetMap XYZ and the Bing Aerial XYZ, those are global layers. So if you are on the input app and you haven't defined what your project extent is in the project, input will just, when you choose that zoom to full extent, will zoom to the whole world, which isn't very useful when you're working on a single city block like I am. So I can set that in here from the the view settings tab. So this view settings tab of project properties lets me set my project full extent. And so I can click map canvas extent so that my current map canvas extent is the full extent of my project. So I won't be zoomed out to the whole world when I'm collecting data accidentally when I'm out in the field. You can also see that when you have Mergin Maps installed in project properties, there's a Mergin Maps tab. And this allows you to set photo quality settings. So you can choose to have lower quality photos to take up less space. And there's also a new snapping setting. And so this allows you to set snapping for the project. So you can actually snap to other features when you're out in the field. So that's only been out, I believe, in the last couple weeks. This is a very new feature. I haven't explored it much. But just be aware that there's a Mergin Maps tab in here with various settings, and I'm sure this will be added to going forward. So with those project level settings, I can save my project. So the next step is probably the most, one of the most important things is we're going to configure attribute table form widgets. So tables in QGIS can be viewed in the default table view, or they can be viewed as a form. So for example, if I open up my attribute table for my survey trees, I don't have any features yet, but there's this little toggle in the lower right to toggle between form view and table view. And field form widgets allow us to configure this data form into a much more intuitive way, including pick lists, so that there are, like if we know that there's certain species of trees that we're going to encounter, we can have a pick list of certain trees, for example. So the data collector can just pick those. Or if you're collecting sewer pipelines, you can, and you're going to collect the diameter of the pipe, you can have the certain diameters that you're going to run into, and the user can just pick from the list. So you can do things like that by attribute table form widgets. So there are a large array of field form widgets. This is the web page for Mergin Maps, and they've done a lot of work on the documentation in the last year. So they have a whole section on this, setting up field form widgets. I will put this into the chat, this URL. So they have a widget gallery so that you can see what the different widgets would look like. And they even have example projects that include some of these so that you can download those projects and look at them. So, and by project, I mean QGIS projects that have layers set up with these different widgets. So for example, they have a QR code barcode scanner widget. There's numeric field widgets that let you, as a user, see something like this, or a range slider that allows the user to slide this back and forth to get the right number instead of entering text. There are value maps, which basically are pick lists like this. So we can, we're going to see how to use those in this next section. So I'm going to right click on my survey layer and open up layer properties for it. And instead of the symbology tab, I'm going to go to the attributes form. And from the attributes form, I can see all the different attributes that I added to this. And so we have, start with the FID. The FID feature ID field is just part of the GeoPackage structure. All GeoPackage layers have this, and it will get auto-populated as you collect data. So you don't really need the data collector to see this. So this can be a widget type instead of text edit. It can be hidden. So these are all the different widget types that we have in QGIS. And so only the ones that would pertain to a numeric field like FID are active at this time. But I can choose hidden for this. So it will still be collected and it'll still be there, but the data collector does not have to see it. Next is tree species. And for any of these widgets, not only can we select the widget type, but we can add an alias up here. And the alias will be what the data collector sees on the mobile phone when they get to this question. So instead of just the attribute name, tree species, I could put a question in there. So I could, I'm going to copy and paste this. I could type in enter the tree species as a prompt for the data collector so they know what to do with this particular question. There's some other options in here. Reuse last entered value. With text fields, which this is going to be text, I'm just going to have the user enter the tree species. For these, you can also make it multi-line, which isn't really appropriate for this particular one, but might be for others. And we'll look, there's a constraint section and a default section as well. So if there were one tree species that was dominant in an area, I could make that the default value so that it was there by default and you only changed it if you needed to. The next one is tree type. So this is going to be whether it's deciduous or evergreen. So I'm going to enter an alias of deciduous or evergreen. And I'm going to make the widget type a value map. So a value map lets me create a pick list of values to choose from. So I can have two values here, deciduous or evergreen, that the user chooses. So I can put in deciduous as the value and the description. And then for the other one, evergreen. So that's what the user is be able to choose one of those. So this is, again, a way to eliminate data collection errors because the user has to pick from the available list. Next one is fruit tree. And this one is a Boolean field. And since it's Boolean, QGIS automatically defaults to a checkbox, true or false. And so that will work well for this. Down in the display settings, you can choose whether you want that to read true or false or other values. True or false works fine for this. And so for my field alias, I can just put fruit tree ? The next one is circumference. And circumference, here, there's going to be some specific instructions. We want the person to measure the circumference of the tree at 1.3 meters above the ground in centimeters. So I'm going to use the alias to give that information to the data collector. So I type in measure the circumference at 1.3 meter above ground in centimeters. And for circumference, since this is a decimal field, we have some choices here. Instead of text edit, I'm going to choose this one called range. And with range, there are a couple choices. It can be editable. You can have it be a slider, or you can have it be a dial. So a slider would be, from this web page, would be this sort of situation right here, where we have this slider that goes between a minimum and maximum numeric range and allows the user to slide that way. You can set these, so you can set these up in a different way. You can also have a dial, which would just literally be a dial that the user turns to set the value. I'm going to leave this at editable, but I can also go in here and set a minimum and maximum value instead of this huge number here. So I'm going to try to clear this. So here for the minimum value, I'm going to enter a value of 5 centimeters. And for the maximum value, I'm going to enter 1,000. So this will just constrain the values that the user can enter. They can't go below 5 or over 1,000, but I can put the step at 0.5. So they can go in 0.5 increments between 5 and 1,000 by entering the step there. So you can set up a numeric value in multiple ways. For the photograph, I can just enter an alias, take a photo. You might have specific instructions for how the photo is taken. And this will be an attachment. So instead of text edit, I'll change this to attachment. So there are some options here. You can store the path as an absolute path or relative to project path. I'm going to choose relative to project path. You can also change the storage mode. And down here, there's a section called Integrated Document Viewer. And for photographs, you want this to be set to image. And this will tell QGIS basically how to display it in the form. So when you look at the form and you're looking at the resulting attribute table in QGIS and you look at the form, you'll actually see the photo because QGIS knows that this is a file of type image. You can also set the width and height of the preview here as well. The files themselves will be stored as JPEGs or PNGs and just put into the folder that you're collecting your data into. once you've synchronized it. For the date, here we can use the date time widget, which it defaults to since this is a date time field. And we can here use a default value. So in my case, I'm going to assume that the current time and date is when the data was collected. And there's a QGIS function called now that I can put in here that will record the current date and time by default. So the user doesn't really have to do anything. So that's a good example of using a default value. Then we have the notes section. And so this will just be a place for the user to record anything that needs to be mentioned about the particular tree and that they're collecting. And this is an example where maybe making it multi-line could make sense so that they could take multiple lines of text as they're typing into their phone. And then finally, there's collector. And the collector is, again, there so that you'll have record of who's collecting the data. And we're going to use text edit as the widget type. But we have default values here. So there's a couple of different ways you could set the default value for a data collector. You could simply enter your name here as the default. And in that case, you would put these single quotes around it since it's text. And in QGIS, that's always how you enter text into an expression, is surrounding it in single quotes. You see, if I take one of those away, it shows me there's a syntax error. And it will give you a preview of the result. QGIS also has variables, which are ways to store constants. And there are some mergin variables. So mergin maps comes with variables. And so let me bring up that web page. Where did I put that? Oh, no, let me find the link to that. Ah, maybe it's in my slide. Yep. So these are variables that mergin comes with. So QGIS itself won't recognize these, but when I get onto my mobile phone and collect data, mergin maps will recognize these. So when you are logged in to your account, @mergin username here will be your username. So you could use @mergin username as the default for the data collector field, and that would put the mergin username into that field. There's some other mergin variables that could be useful in other fields, the mergin URL, the mergin project name, mergin project owner, mergin project full name, and mergin project version. So you can use any of these as default values for different fields in your data collection form if they're useful. So what I can do here instead is type in mergin underscore username, and QGIS will, mergin will recognize that and find it. This is actually a new feature. Mergin maps must have been updated because it didn't used to be able to give you a preview of this in QGIS, but now it can. I'm logged into my mergin maps account in the plugin, so it's finding that variable and entering my mergin username here as the preview. So I can use that as the default for data collector. So with that, I can click OK and save my project. And just to give you an idea of what these could look like, if I put this tree layer into edit mode and just record a tree here on my desktop, this attribute form that pops up is kind of similar to what the user would see on their phone. It's a little nicer on the phone, but here I can enter a tree species. I can pick from the list whether it's deciduous or evergreen. I can click the Boolean for fruit tree, enter a number, take a photograph. It's defaulting to the current date and time, and it has my data collector name in there. So you can see how these would work. If I had a photograph, it would preview that for me. So I can click cancel. I'm not going to collect that point right now, but that's how those widgets that I just set up will function once you're on your phone. The last thing we can do with that, we can take it one step further and go back into the layer properties for the survey layer. And I can use the drag and drop designer. And this allows you to organize your attributes in a more logical way, especially if you have a lot of different data elements that you need to collect. So instead of auto generate up at the top here, I can choose drag and drop designer. And this allows me to organize the way that form looks. So FID, for example, I don't really need to appear in the form, again, because it's just a feature ID. So I can remove that from the form. It's still one of my attribute columns. It's just not going to be something I see in the form. And then these others I can organize into folders. So there is this little button here that allows me to add a new tab or group to my form. So if I click that, I can add a new container. This would basically like be adding a tab to a spreadsheet or a tab to your form. So I can call this tree info and click OK. And what I can do is organize some of these fields underneath that tree info tab. So tree species, tree type, fruit tree, circumference. And then I could add another one called other details. And then I could add the other fields underneath there. And this way I have my data more organized in the form. I can click OK. And now if I do that same operation and I go and add a tree, you'll see that the form is organized into two tabs, one with the tree info and one with the other details. So this is especially useful with large survey forms. So I'm going to save my project to make sure that's all saved. We've done all the preparation that we need to do in our QGIS project, and we're ready to make a Merge Maps project out of it now. So this is when you need the Merge Maps plugin. So you get this from the plugin repository. Searching for Mergin will allow you to find it and install the plugin. And this plugin will show up as a toolbar, and it will also show up as a data provider down here. And you'll initially have to log in. So log in with the same credentials you use for your when you created your account. And once you've done that, in the browser panel, if you expand Merge Maps, if you've created projects, you will see those listed here. These are all ones that I've created, and this little icon means that they're in the cloud. If there were any that another Merge Maps user shared with me, I would see them here. And then explore are just projects that users have created that you can look at and download. So when we create our project, we can choose whether we want it to be a private or a public project. So these would be ones that people have made as public projects. So the next step, now that we have got everything set up, is to click this plus button on the toolbar, create Merge in Maps project. And we get this window that pops up. Since we have done all the right things with our project, we can use the current project as is. But if you are just working with a new basic project, starting from scratch, you can use this option. If you have a project where layers aren't all stored in the same folder, you could use this option, which would package everything into the same folder. But we can use the current QGIS project as is, since we used all the best practices. And then we can just give it a name. I'll call it October course demo. And I'll click finish, and it will create a Merge in Maps project, meaning right now it's uploading the project data to my Merge in Maps account. I can click close and open up my Merge in Maps account. So here's my Merge in Maps account. I'm signed into mergeinmaps.com with my username and password. And if I refresh this, there's October course demo that I just created 0 minutes ago. And so now I'm basically ready to collect data outside. So I think this would be a good time for a short break. Let's take a 5-minute break because I need to get this AirDroid cast. I'm going to set it up so I can show you my mobile phone as I use input. So let's take a 5-minute break, come back at 15 after, and I'll show you how the rest of the workflow works. Okay, is everyone back? Zoom has these little.
Yeah, we are here.
We're all here? Okay, good. Great. Okay, so you should be seeing my phone now. And I'm going to open up the Merge in Maps app. This was another project I was working with. So if I now across the bottom click on projects, I will see all of my projects. I probably need to refresh it since I've just uploaded that project. So I'm going to drag down to refresh. Click on my projects. Okay, so now you can see there's the October course demo with this little download icon updated 6 minutes ago. So I'm going to click the download button to pull it down to my phone. And then I'm going to click on the project and you'll see that it opens up. So you can see it gives me my location, and it will, as I turn the phone, it shows which way I'm facing, the little field of view. Down here, it's giving my GPS accuracy. And this is not a best practice. I'm sitting indoors, which is not how you collect field data. So I have a really bad GPS accuracy because it's not really using GPS now. It's using the triangulation off of cell phone towers or my Wi-Fi signal to find me. So I don't have very good accuracy, but it does give me this indication down here, and I can click on that and it will give me my latitude and longitude, my horizontal and vertical accuracy. And if I click down below, manage GPS receivers, this is how I could connect to perhaps a third-party Bluetooth receiver if I wanted to increase my accuracy, when I had another GPS receiver that I wanted to connect to, I could do it from that location in the app. Go back. If I want to go ahead and collect data, I would click the record button down here. And there's this more section. And if I click on more, you'll see zoom to project. And so since I set the project extent to just be my study area, if I click on that, it's not going to zoom me to the whole world. It's just going to zoom to the extent that I set that for. If I click on map themes, the second to last option there, I'll see the different map themes that I set up. So for example, I could choose OSM offline, and you'll see just the MB tile files that were created around my study area. So I can switch between map themes as I want to in the field using that more section. So that's where those will be found. And if I want to record a point, first I can like pinch the screen and zoom in and see the map a little bit better. And if I want to record a point, I would hit the record button. And at that point, it's going to give me a warning that I have low GPS accuracy. That's fine. And it also shows me my survey layers down here. So if I had multiple survey layers set up, this is where I could choose which one I was going to record data into. For me, I'm just going to use the survey trees. And now what I can do is choose the add point option, and I can add a point. And this is where I'll see my feature form. So I could enter a tree, like an apple tree, deciduous or evergreen, it's deciduous, fruit tree, true. I can enter a number for the circumference. And then if I want to enter the other info, I switch to the other tab up here, other details. And I could take a photo. I can take a photo of the apple tree that I would be collecting data on if I was outside. And click OK to accept that. You'll see the date is defaulted to. I can enter a note. Oops. I meant to type collected inside. And it has my collector name down there, which is fine. So generally, you might back up to take a picture of the feature, but when you go and click save, that's when the point will actually be recorded. So it's good to go and stand right next to the object that you want to record at that point. I could also go down here and edit the geometry. So I could drag the map and move the point exactly where I want it to be. And then click save. And so there I have 1 point collected. I could take one more, add a point. Say this one is a cherry tree, deciduous. It is a fruit tree. And I'll use this edit geometry feature to make it a little better. That one is right there. And click save. So I now collected 2 points in my form. So now if I was done collecting data at this point, I could click on the projects menu in the left-hand side. And now I'll see the project has just been updated and there's this little refresh icon. So this will allow me to synchronize my changes up to the cloud. And now what I can do is go back to my web browser here and refresh my page. And you can see that there's my October course demo. And now I have 2 photos in here that were just recorded. And I can see that there were edits to those. I can also look at history. So I can see that version 1 of my project was created 13 minutes ago. And then there's a version 2 now that was just created with those changes. And I can see that there's 2 features added right here. And one nice thing about this version history is that you can download different versions of a project. So you can download as a zip file any version of the project that you want to acquire. You can also click on an individual version, such as version 2, and see more details about it. So you can see what was added. There's the JPEGs that were added. One survey layer was modified and 2 features were added to it. So you get a lot of information in here. There's also settings for yours. So if you want to invite collaborators to share your project, this is where you would add them. They would have to have Merge and Maps accounts as well. But you could search for them by their username and add them as, or invite them as collaborators to your project. At that point, you can also grant them access rights. So you may not want them to have full access to the project, but you can set what that should be. This is a private project by default, but I can make this public if I want to. If you searched through the public projects for October course demo, you would then find the one I just created. And you can transfer the project to another person if you want. And if you want to delete the project from your account, this is where you would do that. You delete that. And when you do that, you have to enter the name, and you're prompted that this is a permanent deletion and you can't undo it. You can also clone the project or download it from here. This is why sometimes people use Merge and Maps just to share a normal QGIS project with users, is because other Merge and Maps users could just go to your project that you've shared with them and download it if you use that option. Okay, so I've got my project there. So I think this map feature that's in beta, you have to have a special license to use. So I can't show you that. That's something that will be coming, I think. But I can bring QGIS back up, and I can go to my Merge and Maps toolbar and click Synchronize Merge and Maps project. And this project status comes up, tells me that there were 2 files added, the JPEGs, and the survey trees was modified. I'll click. Oh, you can also view the changes. And so I can click sync, and it will pull those changes down from the Merge in Cloud to my local QGIS folder. Synchronized successfully. And there are my 2 points that I collected. If I use the Identify Features tool to click on these and put this into feature form mode, you'll see that I have the, oh, I don't, what's going on? Huh. I must have not saved something correctly when I was on my phone. let me try that again. I'll show you another way this can work. I can go into, in this situation, I can put this attribute table in edit mode on my phone, on my desktop here. And I had Apple for this one and Cherry for this one. Huh. This is not very good for a demo. Okay, so there are those changes. Let me synchronize this again. Bring up the web page. So now there's a third version of it. But I don't know why the images aren't showing. They did get downloaded to my course folder. I can see them right here. But something happened where what basically you should see in here is the path to the photograph on my system. But for some reason, something strange happened there, which is a first. I've never had this demo not work. I must have been some user error on my part that I was not paying attention while I was doing it live. But that's basically the way it works at this point. I could then, now that I've made changes here, I can let me connect to my I've actually had some of these screencasting softwares interfere with this sometimes, and this may be what had happened. So now I'm back on my phone. And if I click on my projects, I will see the October course demo. And now I've made those changes on my desktop. So I need to synchronize it so I have the most current version on my phone. And now as I click on those points, I can see the tree species, apple, deciduous or evergreen, deciduous. Let me try to collect one more point and see if I can get the photo to work correctly here. So I've collected another point. I'm going to synchronize again and see if the photograph makes it to QGIS this time. So I'm going to synchronize again in QGIS. Again, it's found one new feature. And I have a new feature here. Let me try using identify features on this. Yes. So this is the way it should work, where in my identify features form view, I see the photo I just took and all the other information on my two tabs here. And if I open up my attribute table, you'll see that the JPEG is in there. So that's how you would, that's the way it should look when the photograph is taken. So any questions on any of that I've covered?
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, if you want to use your field data, your survey trees later on in a project in QGIS with the pictures, so you don't, so you want to use it in a different project, and you want the path to the pictures to work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm getting at? You want to move the, yeah, you want to use that layer, and you want the path to function. So where do you need to move the pictures into a special folder in order to do that, or?
Yeah, and this was, so yeah, you'd have to, but the best thing to do would be to put the photos and move them with the new QGIS project, because the path to the photo is relative to the project file.
Okay.
So here, these are, all you see is the JPEG because it's in the same folder as the QGIS project file. So just having the name of the JPEG will allow you to preview it, because it's, and the other thing you would have to do, Stina, is open up the layer properties in that new QGIS project.
Mm-hmm.
And go into this form. Oops. On the attributes form tab, go to the photograph field, and you have to set it up as a widget type of attachment.
Okay.
The way you would have originally. And so here the path is stored relative to the project. You can choose to do an absolute path as well. So, but that's how you would set up the file in a new QGIS project, so that it would find those photographs.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Also, there's a lot of really good information on the Mergin Maps support page. It's also possible, for example, to attach multiple photos to a feature, and they have instructions for how to do that here. It takes a little bit more project setup. I'm pasting that link into the chat. To set up multiples, you're basically setting up a relation between a flat table and the survey layer, so that you can have basically multiple photos attached to that.
Can I also have one question?
Yes.
Is it possible to change the name of this photo?
Change the name of the folder.
Of the, the photo. When, for example,
oh, the photo.
We'll add some. Let's say that I'm surveyor and I'm adding some point. Is it possible to automatically set the name of the photo?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. I'll have to look through the Mergin Maps documentation to find that out. I'm really not sure. I can't think of a configuration that I've seen that lets you do that. The only thing I've seen is this photo quality setting. That might be something it would, yeah, I don't know. It may not be possible, but I'll certainly look into it and try to have a better answer next week for our question and answer session.
Okay, so thank you very much.
So one other thing I was going to mention, when you remember I showed you these Mergin variables and how you can use those to use as default values for certain fields. there are also extra position variables that Mergin comes with. So these would allow you, for example, you could use position, latitude, and longitude as the default values for an X and Y column in your survey layer. And Mergin would record the latitude and longitude or whatever, in whatever coordinate system it is that you're using, and populate those fields with that latitude and longitude, X or Y, or altitude or direction. So any of these kind of GPS related measurements you have access to by these position variables. And again, this is, there's a section on this on the Mergin Maps documentation, Mergin Maps /docs/layer position variables. So I will be sending out this assignment to you, and this date is incorrect. We're going to have this due by, let's see, the 11th, and our next course. Yeah, I'm going to have you turn this in by the 24th. So you have plenty of time to get that to me. I'll be sending you this evening also the step-by-step instructions with links to the individual videos. And so you'll have those for as long as you want. They're not going anywhere. And then I do have a couple of shameless plugs at the end here. I also offer a data visualization course. Let me turn that off. So this is a course that walks you through how to do special cartographic techniques in QGIS. So using blending modes, layer effects, expression-based symbology, this thing called geometry generators, how to do 3D fly-throughs, and work with that 3D environment. So a whole suite of tips and tricks on how to do different things with all the powerful renderers and symbolization options that QGIS has. And there's also tips for using special features within print layouts. So that the next course will be coming up in November, and you can find this on our courses webpage. And I also offer a raster data analysis with QGIS Online. So this is a course that teaches you with a site selection analysis how to work with raster data in QGIS, and shows you how to do terrain analysis, slope and aspect, reclassify rasters, how to use the raster calculator to do different things. And then in this case, you're basically looking for potential vineyard locations within a study area. And so you learn how to convert raster data to vector and vice versa to get the final result. This one will also be coming up in November. And I had some slides on the books. I don't know where those slides went. I've written 2 books this year, and I don't know where those slides, there they are. So I have 2 books, QGIS for hydrological applications, which is obviously for hydrologically minded workflows. So it's recipes for catchment hydrology and water management, and it's just updated to QGIS 3.2.2. And I wrote that with my Dutch colleague, Hans van der Kwast. And I also have another book, Discover QGIS 3X, that was just released in August. And this is a larger workbook that has a pretty full treatment of all the features in QGIS. It even has a chapter on field data collection that we just learned. It starts off with the basics of using QGIS, works through spatial analysis, data management, and then cartography at the end. So both of these are available and updated to the latest versions of QGIS, and they're published through Locate Press. So those are my shameless plugs. And this is my contact information. So we still have about 15 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, or if there's anything else you'd like to explore or see, I'm happy to take the time to show you.
I would like to ask a question, if it's okay.
And if not, your brains may be full, so that's fine too. So we do
Can you
have
hear me?
the session next week. So if you run into any issues, you can let me know next week and we'll walk through those. And certainly if you run into any issues, you're welcome to email me as well. I don't want you getting stuck if you're working on this over the weekend or something. So feel free to email me, and if and we can meet next week. Stina, I know you can't make it, so that's fine. Just email me any questions that come up for you. And I'll be following up with all those resources in the next hour or so.
Can you hear me?
So just want to give one more chance. Any other thoughts or questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
No? Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording then, and I will see everyone.